Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our home. We are very delighted and very honored to have His Holiness Radhanath Swami come to our home and spend time with all of you. His schedule is very, very busy, and he's visiting US. He visits once a year. Normally he's based in India, and we are so honored that we have him in our midst. So some of you know him. Some of you are my students who went to Govardhan Eco Village with me. Both the batches are here. If you can please raise your hands. The students who went with me to Eco Village, yes. And the others are some of my students from the campus, Maharaj. So, Maharaj, if I have your permission, can I do your introduction?
I don't know how to answer that question. Whatever makes you happy.
Just be quiet. I'm just going to give you a little introduction about our esteemed speaker today. Half of you know about him because you've heard him speak in India, and the majority of you don't know about him. So I'm going to walk you through a slideshow here for about 5 minutes, and that'll tell you essentially, it'll give you a little glimpse about our speaker here. So we're having a very amazing evening today with His Holiness Radhanath Swami. Maharaj, we refer to the Swami as Maharaj. It's a term of respect. He is a monk in the Krishna Bhakti lineage and a teacher of the devotional path of Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga means the yoga which is tied to devotion. I'm sure all of you have heard of the word yoga. There's different kinds of yoga. So Bhakti means devotion. And his teachings primarily draw from the sacred texts of India, such as the Gita, the Bhagavatam, and the Ramayana. Some of you may have heard of these scriptures. And his teachings aim to reveal the practical application of the sacred traditions while focusing on the shared essence which unites apparently disparate religions. He was born as Richard Slavin to Jewish parents in Chicago. He came to confront a very deep sense of alienation from suburban life and the civil injustices of mid-century America while he was a teenager. At the age of 19, while on a summer trip to Europe, his internal struggles culminated in a commitment to search for God wherever it might lead him. He's the author of an absolutely amazing book entitled The Journey Home. How many of you have read the book? The students have read it. And I believe, because I've read your journals, how you felt about the book. This is an amazing book, and we'll talk about the book a bit later. This is a memoir of his search for spiritual truth, and it documents his odyssey as a penniless hitchhiker through Greece, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and finally India. This is at the age of 19. He lived as a wandering ascetic amongst the forest-dwelling Himalayan yogis and a wide variety of gurus in India and Nepal. His search finally led him to the most holy town in India, which is known as Vrindavan. That is the birthplace of Krishna, and where he found his path amongst the Bhakti yogis. In Vrindavan, he found his teacher he was searching for, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who is the founder of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, known as ISKCON, or commonly known as the Hare Krishna movement. Some of you may have heard of that. At the age of 31, he took the monastic vows of a sannyasin, which means a monk, and became known as Radhanath Swami. He travels regularly throughout India, Europe, and North America, sharing the teachings of Bhakti Yoga. He has guided a lot of community developments and directed a number of acclaimed social action projects, which I'll show you in a minute, including midday meals, and has also worked diligently to establish missionary hospitals, eye camps, eco-friendly farms, the one that we visited in India, schools and ashrams, an orphanage, and a large variety of other initiatives. During his journeys, he has met a large number of influential people. He met the US President Barack Obama. He also met the Dalai Lama. He met with Mother Teresa. He also met recently with the current Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. and also the Indian President, Pranab Mukherjee. He met with Pratibha Patil, the ex-Indian President. And he also met a wonderful social activist, and the students got to meet her. Her name is Sindhutai Sapkal. She is commonly known as the mother of orphans, an absolutely warm and wonderful individual. And he's met a lot of spiritual leaders, such as Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, amongst others. He's met world-renowned musicians and actors, such as Joe Walsh, the English actor Russell Brand, and Forrest Whitaker, who's an American actor. Some of you may have seen his movies. And of course, in the UK, he was invited to speak with the members at the Parliament, the members, the House of Commons and the House of the Lords. He was also invited to speak with the HSBC bankers in UK. He's also involved extensively in the university programs. He has conducted a debate entitled East Meets West in Princeton University. He's a part of major interfaith conferences. He's been invited for the TEDx talks by the London School of Business. He's conducted numerous university programs at universities such as Harvard, Cambridge, MIT, Stanford, NYU, Columbia, and University of Boston. And in terms of corporate world, he's been invited to speak at Google, Apple, Intel, Ford Motors, Oracle, and Starbucks. And of course, right now, he's very popular in the yoga community, and I can see some of the yoga people are here, so you may want to have to speak with him later. And he's also involved with a large number of humanitarian efforts. I'll just show you some of the slides here. The Midday Meal Project in India serves more than 250,000 meals to children every single day. These are the midday meals plan. He's also instrumental in the direction of an absolutely amazing eco-village in the western part of India, close to Mumbai, known as Govardhan Eco-Village. And this eco-village is known for its cows. You met the cows, so you know what I'm talking about. And he's also directed orphanages, which are tied to the eco-village. Under his auspices, there is also a hospice project in Vrindavan, the holy town in Vrindavan. There's a large number of eye camps which are organized under his direction, again in a place close to Vrindavan. He's instrumental in the establishment of a very unique hospital in Mumbai, known as Bhaktivedanta Hospital. Several of you have visited that hospital, so you know how unique that is, because it doesn't tend to the body, it actually tends to the spirit as well, which is a very unique feature of that particular hospital. And then he's involved in schools. This is a school known as Gopal's Garden in Mumbai, where the kids get both material and spiritual education. And finally, he's also involved with a large number of rural projects, giving power to the farmers to be able to tend to themselves. So this is Radhanath Swami. Please join me in giving him a very warm welcome.
Shalakaya chakshuru militam jena asmai Sri Gurave namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Jajate Shatarine. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Bhakta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudhe Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
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 Radha Ramana Hari Govinda 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 Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala 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 Jaya Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Govinda Jaya Jaya Gopala Jaya Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya
Radha Ramana Hari Govinda Jaya Jaya
Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Hare
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Could you hear me? Is this supposed to make it loud? No, it's just turn the volume up. Maximum?
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to be with all of you this evening. Special gratitude to Nandini Radha. What is your other name?
Nitika Parvar.
Yes, like that. And Sachi Dulalji for opening the doors to their beautiful, peaceful home to all of us. And my very special gratitude to all of you. Because this part of the world, there's so many alternatives what you could be doing tonight, and you chose to be here. Thank you. I was asked to speak something about the environment and the root cause of pollution. Is that a good subject? It reminds me of an event that took place some years ago. I had just brought about 4,000 or 5,000 people on a pilgrimage for about 2 weeks to a place called Vrindavan, where throughout the day and night I was going to different places and giving talks. I had to help organize it. We had to feed everyone and find places for them to stay. And at the end, I was to take a flight from Delhi back to Mumbai, where I reside. And when I was at the Delhi airport, I didn't have to deal with any pilgrims. I was just wanted to be left alone and be quiet. So I was sitting there, relishing those. The Minister for the Government of India for the Environment and Forestry is sitting close by, and she wants to speak to you. So, being a foreigner who requires the government to give me visas every year, I naturally agreed. And she approached me, one of the most powerful people of the Indian government, and really an activist, and passionate about what she does. Her name is Maneka Gandhi. She was the daughter-in-law of Indira Gandhi, who used to be Prime Minister. So I was sitting on a little plastic chair, and she stood right over me, and she said, "Namaskar, Swamiji," and we had some pleasant exchanges, and then she raised her voice and said, "What are you yogis and swamis doing for the environment?" You're sitting and meditating and chanting mantras and praying and doing pujas, and the rivers are so polluted, tens and thousands of times beyond what's safe, and hundreds of millions of people are drinking that water and bathing in that water, and the air is polluted and the land is polluted. She went on and on. I said, what are you doing for the environment? So I said, please have a seat. Come here. She sat down. And I expressed to her my thoughts. I said, if a body has a blood disease, and that blood disease is causing symptoms such as boils and rashes, then it's necessary to treat the symptoms. But unless you treat the cause of the disease, however many symptoms you treat, it's going to come again and again and again. So what is the cause of the pollution of the environment? It is the pollution of the human heart. Ralph Waldo Emerson, he wrote that the reason why the society is so crippled socially, there's so much frustration, so much pollution, and people are, it's like in heaps, is because human beings are disconnected from their own selves. Because we're disconnected from our own true self, the heart has become so polluted with greed, with arrogance, with limitless selfishness. I cited a friend of mine who was a professor of economy, of economics. And I was speaking at one of his classes, an American professor. And I asked him, I said, I've not had a bank account since 1969, or signed a check. And I haven't had a job since then. And I only went to one semester of college. And you're asking me to speak in your economics class to graduate students. So I need a little help. What is, I don't even know what economics is actually, as far as a study. I said, what is the study of economics? And he said, I can tell you the essence of the study of economics. Dealing with the problem. The problem is every human being has limitless desires to take from the environment, the resources. And there's only a limited amount of resources. That's economics. So I thought that was really spiritual, actually. What is that disconnect that makes us vulnerable to greed and envy and selfishness? And when we have those things and they get frustrated, we become very angry. What is that causes us to be so obsessed with proving ourselves superior to others? Even to the extent of repressing them, oppressing them, because they're different than us. Unless we clean the ecology of our hearts, even if we clean every river and every ocean and every piece of ground in the whole sky, it's just a matter of time it will all be polluted again. So taking care of the environment externally, in order for it to be sustainable and effective, human beings have to learn to also take care of the internal ecology of their own consciousness. Things could give some pleasure to the mind and senses, but things can never give fulfillment to the heart. Only love can touch the heart. To give love, to receive love. Just about a month ago, I was in Dubai, and I had to give a lecture at this place, and I had to walk through the largest shopping mall on planet Earth to get to where I was going to speak. Now, being a Swami who I haven't gone shopping in like 50 years. And even then I didn't like it. But I was walking through this shopping mall, and it was a Friday night. It was really crowded. There were people from every part of the world. Thousands and thousands of people. There were in huge areas. And I looked in front of me, and there was like a 3-story high aquarium in the shopping mall. And it was mostly sharks swimming around. And as I was there, and there was music playing, and there's so many very high end type of stores there. And I was just trying to get through. It was hard to get through because there were so many people crowded everywhere. And then I saw something very interesting. I saw a little girl. She was about 5 years old. She had blonde hair. She had blue eyes. She was, I think, American, actually. And she was coming up an escalator, and she was laughing so loud that even with all the noise of the music and everything else, it caught my attention. She was laughing, and one hand was holding her mother, and one hand was holding her father, and she was kind of dancing in there, and she was dancing. And she was trying to run away, and they were catching her, and she was just so happy, frolicking around. She was completely oblivious to everything else going around there. You know, just there were sharks right over her behind a little glass this big, and it was swarms of people. So I was very pleased to see her happiness. But you know, we Swamis, we're kind of programmed to look at things from different dimensions. So I was thinking, she's so happy because she's holding the hands of her parents. But what if she lost her parents in this crowd? What would be her condition if she was alone, without the shelter of her mother and father? She would have been completely disoriented. She would have been either screaming hysterically in the agony of confusion and feeling lost and intimidated, or she would have just been totally silent because she couldn't even make a sound. What's the difference between a completely blissful child and a completely miserable child? Her parents were there. She felt protected by their love. There were a lot of people there that were bigger and stronger than her parents. There were probably a lot of people there that were wealthier than her parents. But she wasn't finding, her heart was not finding that fulfillment because her parents loved her. And she loved her parents. And that was her shelter. That was what made her so free and so happy. In a few days is the 4th of July. It's Independence Day. day when we celebrate freedom. But really, what is freedom? Of course, we all want and we're willing to, nations are willing to fight and die for political and social freedom. But are we free within ourselves? Social and political freedom have the greatest value when they actually facilitate us to find freedom within ourselves. There's the famous story of Socrates, where he was in prison, and they came to bring some poison hemlock to him to drink, for him to die. And he told the guard, he said, "You can't kill me until you first find me." He's in chains right there. He said, "You can't kill me until you first find me." Because he understood he's really a free man. Because he had realized who he really was beyond birth and beyond death. An evolved human society is one where we love people and use things. Use things to express our love for people. But unfortunately, the influences of the world are so much to induce people to love things and use people to get them and keep them. That's a pollution. It's due to a disconnect of our body, our mind, and our true self. It's a disconnect from the love that we're seeking. And it's true. Music is very much an expression of the human heart and consciousness. And how many songs are about the happiness of getting a lot of money? And how many songs are about the happiness of getting a lot of power and prestige? And even how many songs are about losing those things? There's a few. But probably 99% of the songs are about the happiness of having someone who loves us and someone we love. And probably most of those songs are about the pain of lost love. Is that accurate? That's what people sing about. You go here in California, you have Hollywood, which is the standard of the universe for for entertainment. And it's mostly about, the plot is usually somewhere intertwined about love. Love between, two people. Or love between a compassionate person, his love for his people, or her people, and their love. Why is that so popular? Because it's human nature. Real wealth, real freedom, is freedom from the anxiety and the loneliness of being without love, giving and receiving. When we really have that, we can be happy in practically any situation. From a spiritual perspective, the origin of that is between the soul's love for God, who has many names. Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. beautiful verse by Sri Chaitanya. There's one God who has many names. It's really interesting. Our ashram in Mumbai, every year we have a contest called Gita Champions League. And it's a contest actually that's held in primary schools for young children. And we give them the Bhagavad Gita and a little synopsis of what the Gita teaches. And then what happens is the schools themselves want their children to be a part of the contest. So the schools sign up, and then they bring many of their students. And they study and they study and they discuss, and then there's a test. And this year I think almost 4,000 students participated. And something really interesting happened. This is a test on the Bhagavad Gita, which is the primary scripture of the Vedas that generally Hindus follow. And this is in India. And the winner of the contest was a 12-year-old Muslim girl, which was quite interesting. It was so interesting. Her father was a Muslim man, goes to the masjid, the mosque. He was so proud of his daughter, he called a press conference. And all the media of India came. It was the front page news. It was headline news on television. The chief minister of Maharashtra invited this 12-year-old girl to his palace to give her awards. And just last week, the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, invited her to his palace in New Delhi to give her gifts and awards. And just 2 days ago, I got a link. See, because you know how internet is, there's these links all over the place. Somebody said, watch this link, so I pressed it. And it was an interview on a national television show after she got the award by Narendra Modi. And she was speaking in Hindi, quoting a verse from Bhagavad Gita. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata abhyutanam dharmasya tadatmanam srajamyam. And she spoke in perfect Sanskrit. And that verse says that there's one God, but that one God throughout history has come in many forms with many names to deliver the same message for the same mission of compassion to all his children. So that was beautiful because that's a universal message that includes all the great spiritual paths of the world. So the essence of yoga, the essence of religion, the essence of spirituality, in this sense, is to actually reconnect with our true self. To harmonize the body and the mind with the Atma, with the soul. The soul is Satchidananda, eternal, full of knowledge, full of bliss. But then when we make that connection, we naturally realize the relationship or the connection between the soul and God. And what is that connection? Prem or bhakti? Love. It's a connection of love. One lady that I was very good friends with, she was dying of cancer in London. And I was in Bombay. And her husband called me on the phone and said, she's supposed to die within 4 days. She really wants to see you before she dies. So I made an airline ticket to go to London But the day I was about to leave, you know what happened? A volcano erupted in Iceland. Do you remember that? And the ashes went into the sky, and every single airport in the whole Europe and North Africa was closed. Not a single flight could go. So I couldn't go, and to hitchhike back like I did before took 6 months between India and it's hard these days. And boats take about 3 weeks. So I felt really helpless. And day after day, all the airports were still closed. And one evening I was just about to go to sleep in a little straw mat I stay on, and a person came to my room and said, "I heard you want to go to London." I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I'll try to get you there." And I said, "How?" He said, "Come with me." I said, "Where?" He said, "To Zambia." You know where Zambia is? It's in Central Africa. It's kind of the opposite direction from Mumbai. I said, how is going to Zambia going to help? He said, "I have to go to Zambia to meet the president of Zambia. And then I have a private jet, and I'll somehow or other get under the ashes and get you to London." So I said, "All right." So we did. We went to Zambia. We met the president and everything, and then we got to London about midnight. And early the next morning, I met my friend and her family. And just before I got there, she told her husband, and he was telling me this. And she was still alive. Actually, I spent the day with her, and then that night she passed away. The next night, actually. So he was telling me that she was a very active, dynamic lady her whole life. She loved to just get things done. And she always wanted to help anybody who was in trouble. And she would really stand up for people's rights. If you were doing the right thing, you just loved her. But if you weren't doing the right thing, you'd probably be really scared of her. She was that kind of lady. She was an activist. But now she's paralyzed and she can't walk, and her husband's cleaning her excrement and feeding her with tubes. And she said, what am I compared to what I was? She said, on one level I feel completely irrelevant. Then she smiled. She said, but I am infinitely relevant. Because she calls God Krishna. She said, because Krishna loves me. And because Krishna loves me, I have supreme relevance. Then she said something really interesting. That I can't think I'm better than others because Krishna loves everyone. So everyone has supreme relevance. And she said, nothing can take that love away from me. Not even death. Because Krishna loves our souls. And when that love touches us, our love awakens. There's a beautiful poem that there's a blue lotus that only blossoms when it's touched by the rays of the full moon at night. And similarly, when our hearts are touched by that love, by that grace, then they blossom. And then we learn to love. And that's the principle of spirituality, to awaken that. And in that state there's satisfaction, there's fulfillment. And real wisdom is when we find that inner fulfillment, and then through our abilities, through our intelligence, through our resources, we express that love from within, without. Whether we're billionaires or millionaires, or just people working to make a living, or monks with nothing. We all have incredible relevance. And when we actually find that inner fulfillment within ourselves, then we learn to express it through whatever we do. And how is that love expressed? Through compassion. That's the greatest need in the world. Compassion. Yes, there's drought, and yes, there's earthquakes, and there's so many difficulties that people have to deal with. But if we connect to that love and we learn the greatest treasure that we have is to be an instrument of compassion. So many of the problems of the world can be overcome. Recently there was this earthquake in Nepal, and our Bhaktivedanta hospital in Mumbai, they sent out a group of doctors and volunteers to help. And what they found was very interesting. There were thousands of people whose houses were completely destroyed, living in tents. And not a single one of them had insurance for their houses. That means if it's gone, it's gone. And their shops were destroyed. That means they have no means of livelihood. And so many people, their limbs were broken, their arms were broken, their hips were broken from being in a house and everything caves in. And family members were either injured or killed. It was really very, very traumatic. But what these people needed most, we had our orthopedic surgeons there putting casts on them and putting their bones in place. But what they appreciated the most was spiritual care. Spiritual care is not a sectarian concept. It's a concept that's based on real compassion for people. How to deal with losing everything. How to deal with losing loved ones. How to go on living. How to have hope. How to have faith. How to have motivation. And the people who received that were so enthusiastic to serve others. They were so grateful. People who had nothing, who lost everything, were just completely grateful and happy to serve food to people who were starving, to bring the doctors to the tents where people needed medicines, and to also have kirtan, chanting God's names to inspire people's hearts. And the doctors from Mumbai were telling me that we were all knowing that after a couple of weeks or a few weeks, we're going to go back to our nice apartments in Bombay, where we have our families and we have everything we need, because doctors are usually quite prosperous. But these people were happier than us. They had nothing, but they were experiencing the joy of serving because they knew how much they were hurting. They knew how much others were hurting, and therefore serving people for them was such a meaningful experience. Compassion. They were feeling God's love and they wanted to just whatever they had share it with others on every level. So when we don't have that satisfaction internally, then we try to find it outside of ourselves. But things just don't satisfy us. The more you get, the more you need. A few years ago I spoke at the House of Lords in London, and I gave a little talk, but one thing I said, they gave me a standing ovation. Now it's interesting. To get a standing ovation in the House of Lords is not an easy thing. But before I tell you what I said, I have to qualify what kind of standing ovation it was. Are you ready? Have you heard the story before? Then I'll tell it. When they say House of Lords, it really is like that. Because there's really strict rules. So the people who organized this, the House of Lords themselves and the HSBC Bank, there was 80 people allowed in this particular chamber of the House of Lords. And everybody who was coming were dukes and duchesses and counts and countesses and lords and ladies and members of parliament and rabbis and archbishops and priests. It was very esteemed people. CEOs of corporations, politicians. 125 people came. They were only allowed to send out 80 invitations, but they didn't think people would come, so they sent like more, and everyone came. So the administrator said, only 80 people allowed. Now those are not the kind of people you could turn back at the gate, because it was raining out this evening, and they had their umbrellas, and they showed up, and what are we going to do? It was an emergency. I wasn't part of the organization. I was just supposed to give a keynote speech. But what happened is it was really tense because the people were saying, the administrators, you have to tell 40 people to leave. We're not letting them in. So we can't do that. These are, leaders of society. It's an insult. So finally, they said, you could let them in, but no one's allowed to sit on a chair. We have to remove all the chairs. So for the whole event, everyone was standing. So in that way, I got a standing. But they did clap. And what I said is, it's a saying, I didn't make it up, that you can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy. Money cannot buy peace. Money cannot buy loving relationships. Money cannot buy inner fulfillment. In the history of the universe, it never has been able to do so, and it never will. It can help. I remember I was in Chicago, and I was asked to speak at this corporation. and the CEO flew in a private jet. And to be honest with you, I had to hitchhike there. This was just a few years ago. And hitchhike means I had to ask people for rides. And when I got there, there was the CEO, the COO, the CFO, and the CMO and me. And the CEO, he heard about what I said at the House of Lords. And he said, it's so true. And he went in a whole list of all the things that money cannot buy. Cannot buy peace, cannot buy good relationships between brothers and sisters and parents and children. It cannot buy, about 5 minutes, he had a list. He's a billionaire. So I'm a little Swami. I said to him, well, I believe what you're saying, but then why do you work so hard for money all the time? And he gave a real good answer. He said, money cannot buy all the good things in life that we really need, but it's nice to have what money can buy. So I said, that's an honest answer. I really appreciate it. So why is there so much pollution in the environment? Why is there so much crime? Why is there so much hatred and religion and among races, among nations? Because there's such a void in people's hearts. When we're not really connected to our own souls, we cannot feel the joy of compassion.
This is Rosemary right here.
We cannot see and experience and know
All you have to do to
the
smell it,
unity of life, the sacredness of life.
just like rub it.
Whatever our sex, whatever our nationality, whatever our religion, whatever our social background, whatever our color, whatever our species,
Like
when we're
what?
connected to ourselves, we can actually understand and appreciate. That every living being is a child of the same source, and we're all related. And that state of mind is actual fulfillment. And then we'll see the earth, the environment, as sacred property. And we'll respect. We have no right to exploit. If we exploit Mother Earth, we are causing harm to all living beings who are equally dependent on Mother Earth. Whoever we are, we're breathing the same air. We're depending totally on the same rain. We're depending on the same earth that's providing our food, our grains, our fruits, our vegetables. So if we're actually concerned with other living beings, then we have to be concerned with the condition of Mother Earth. And if we understand that she is the divine property of God, all these resources, then naturally, with great conviction, we will live in a way that is as sustainable and honest as possible. You see, there's not an environmental problem in this world. There's just a spiritual crisis. We're disconnected. That's the disease in the blood. And all these things that we're dealing with are just symptoms. And we have to deal with the symptoms. But side by side, it's important that we help to clean the ecology of the heart. So So I told all these things to the Union Minister of India's Environment and Forestry, Maneka Gandhi, and she listened. And I said, we should all work together. Politicians, social activists, yogis, swamis, mullahs, priests, nuns, we should all work together. The corporate people, the scientists, the educators, we should understand what we all have in common. And she said, yes, Swamiji, we should work together. And then she left to board her plane. And then I got about 5 minutes to rest. So these are very, very important principles. The Bhagavad Gita tells that true intelligence is to actually find that sacred place within ourselves, where there's true joy, where there's true meaning, where there's true fulfillment. And simultaneous to that journey home within ourselves, that we pursue a way in which we can be activists within this world. And I have seen some of the most compassionate, loving activists who are software engineers and who are politicians and who are corporate industrialist business people and who are farmers. But they have conscience and they care because they're connected. I hope this is what I was supposed to speak about. That was my interpretation.
Yes, Mama, that's all.
It was? You see, her husband, Sachidulal, drove me here from Los Angeles, and he had a little slip of paper that said, speak about the ecology of the heart. What the heart is yearning for. So I tried to do that. Would anyone like to ask any questions?
What did you tell the industrialists when you say so to open the heart, the man, the CEO? So how were you able to help him recognize that whatever millions he's making, perhaps the thing would be to share?
I kind of told him the same thing I just told you. I didn't have as much time as I have with you. That, through the association we keep. In the tradition I follow, there's 3 principles that are very important to clean the ecology of the heart. Satsang, sadhana, and sadachar. Satsang means to keep the company of people who really fill us with positive energy, who really enlighten us, who really help us to keep focused on the true goals of life and the true meaning of life. Satsang means to be with enlightened people, or people who are seeking enlightenment, because they really help us. Because in this world we're constantly being bombarded by weapons of mass distraction. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they've found that when they're really vulnerable to being distracted by these addictions, when they have people who have like minds, who are really trying to help each other to live on a higher principle. And actually, the whole principle of AA is they're helping each other to remain focused on how they need to seek the power of that higher force, that higher power than themselves. And that's very true in every aspect of life, especially spiritually. There's so much negativity, there's so much greed and envy and arrogance and illusion in this world. Selfish passions. And people are so bewildered by these emotions. And we're all very vulnerable to them. But if we have the company of people who are really striving for enlightenment, that type of community really helps us to remain focused. That's satsang. And sadhana means to have some sacred time every day where we actually make that inner connection ourselves. Through prayer, through meditation. In our tradition we chant these beautiful names of Krishna, of God. It connects us with the divine presence that is within ourselves. And that connection creates like a foundation. The Bible says that if you build your house on a foundation of stone, then no storm can make it fall. But if you build the same house on a foundation of shifting sand, then when the storms come, it collapses. And this world, whoever we are, whatever our role may be, storms come. The kind of storms we don't want. Will we maintain our integrity? Will we maintain our faith? Will we maintain the inner fulfillment of the heart in those storms? Will our love sustain? If we have a foundation. And having a spiritual practice actually gives us that strength. And then the satsang, the company of enlightened people, our own spiritual practice that really connects us to our own souls and to God and to our own principles, then we have incredible strength. But then we have to use our strength. That's called sadachara. That means to live with character. There's a saying, if you lose your wealth, you lose nothing. If you lose your health, you lose something. If you lose your character, you lose everything. So good company, devoted spiritual practice, and living with character. These three principles can actually see us through all of the obstacles and challenges of life. So I explained that to him. And then I said, you can have your private jet and you could be a billionaire, but what are you... I said, are you any happier as a billionaire than you were when you were a millionaire? or when you were just kind of growing up as a child? Are you really that much happier? He said, no, life's so complicated. So if you have all this, you should see it as it's gifts. Yes, you earned it through your hard work, but a lot of other people are working hard too. It's a gift, and it's a responsibility. For one who much is given, much is expected. And that's where the true happiness and fulfillment and love of your life will be. Not in how much you get, but how much you give. Does that answer your question? And if young people could learn that principle, then our world has a great future. Another question? We have my dear friend Chaitanya Mangal here. He's a special guest. He works close by, and I've known him since he's a little boy. And now
36 years. We've known each other, yeah.
36 years? Amazing. Really proud of you. Would you like to share anything with these wonderful people?
It's just really enlivening to see everyone that's here and listening to you speak and knowing that he really does travel all around the world and share these things. And for me this evening, I work over in Oxnard, and so I happened to call because he's in town. We were going to meet on Thursday, and then he said, "Oh, but I'm also having some program somewhere out. I'm not quite sure where, but Camarillo." And I said, "Camarillo? That's 10 minutes from me." So he made the nice arrangements with you all, and I get to come and participate this evening, so I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you. Professor Nandini Radha, is there anything you would like us to do at this moment?
Do any of you have any questions? I know a couple of you wanted to ask questions. I can't remember, but I remember some of you saying that. Was it you, Marisol? I know there were two of you who told me one. Please go ahead.
What did you learn from traveling? Because I know you've been traveling everywhere, but you started journaling when you were how old? 18 years old? I haven't read your book, I'm sorry. But I was just curious to know how did traveling help enlighten you, or what did it do for you?
Well, I was born in Chicago. Are any of you from Chicago? And I grew up when my family, when I was 4 years old, they moved to a village about 30 miles north of Chicago. And the winters were really cold. It's called the Windy City. And I remember every winter from my little childhood, I was shoveling the driveway for my parents. I was thinking, God, this is really difficult. And when I got a little older and I started listening to the radio, I would hear these songs about surfing in California. About beautiful girls on surfboards in California and everything like this. While I was shoveling the snow, and ice cold winds that just go right through your bones. And anyways, I kind of had a desire to travel in those days. And my friend Gary, who I grew up with since we were friends since we were 10 years old, when we were about 17, we came to California. We were kind of counterculture hippie people at that time. We lived in Haight-Ashbury and Laguna Beach and Sunset Strip, and we were just happy because there was so many nice people and everything. But we were on a spiritual journey. And when I was 19, I was in New York visiting a friend. I hitchhiked there. And my friend Gary, he called me. He was in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He said, "You have to come. There's something urgent I must talk to you about." So I hitchhiked to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, which is near Philadelphia. And he was sitting on the floor with another friend of ours named Frank. And they had a map of Europe. And he said, "We're going to Europe in 4 days. You must come with us." I said, "I don't have any money. I have a job this summer in Chicago." And he said, "I don't have any money either. But Frank is going to pay for both of us." So I was convinced. This is what God wants me to do. So we got on a plane to Iceland. And then we had a connecting flight to Luxembourg. And we stayed in a little tent together. And then first morning we were there, Frank got robbed. He left all his money in the tent when we went to bathe in a little stream, and somebody stole it. So Frank said, "We have to go back today." So he went back, Gary and I stayed. And we ended up just hitchhiking around Europe. And actually, I was looking for a higher understanding, because those were the days of civil rights, Vietnam War, and it was very confusing. And it wasn't just theoretical, it was very real. So much greed, so much hypocrisy, so much hate, even in the name of God. So I was very much looking for answers. Going to forests, I was going to monasteries and cathedrals and synagogues. And eventually I was living in a cave in Greece with Gary. And I got a calling to go to India. So I left my friend and hitchhiked to India. It took 6 months from London to the Himalayas. And the lessons I learned during those travels each one of them I really believed was a great gift in my life. The Bible says, "Seek and ye shall find." The Vedas say, "Saragrahi," that we should be always looking for the essence in everything, always seeking the opportunity in every situation for positive transformation. And if we're actually looking for that, we'll find it. Even while we're going through certain situations, sometimes very traumatic and very scary, very threatening, which many experiences like that. But I learned that if I'm always seeking the opportunity to spiritually grow and come closer to my true self and to God, that the good times and the hard times all help me. It's the attitude of gratitude. If we're grateful for life, then we can actually really learn to see opportunities. And oftentimes it's in the hardest times we don't like that we grow the most. If we are seeking that positive experience. that higher connection. If we're not, those same experiences can really make us angry or depressed. And that's something I really learned from my travels. And then when I was in India, I traveled in Himalayas, and I lived with yogis and lamas and gurus and babas and sadhus and rinpoches and all sorts of people. I'll just tell you one little story. I was high in the Himalayas, and there was practically nobody around. It was really high in the Himalayas. It's up near Kulu Valley. The editors took this out of the journey because they thought it didn't push forward the plot. So it's a true story. Everything in there is true, but some things were taken. But I was up there in the Himalayas, I'll never forget this, and this really, really classical, traditional Indian holy man. He had long, matted hair that went, below his feet. But so that he could walk, he had to wrap it up like a big beehive on top of his head. And he hadn't cut his hair or shaved his beard, I think, in like 40 years. And he was just wearing these old robes. He had like these beads, like big Rudraksha beads. He was really a sadhu. And he came in, he had a little cloth bag. That's all he had, just a cloth bag, nothing else. He had no shoes, living in the Himalayan forest. And he walked up to me and he said, I have something that I want to give you because I see that you're truly a seeker of the truth. He said, I have something for you that will change your life. And then he gave it to me. And I was thinking this is going to be some really secret mantra. Or some incantation from Vedic literatures. It was like in a little cloth bag. And he left. And I was thinking I want to really be in the proper state of mind to read this, enlightening incantation that he just gave me, or whatever it is. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's some mandala, but I wanted to prepare myself. So I found a little cave, and I sat down in the cave. I meditated for a couple hours, and then I took it out of the bag. It was a booklet.
A what?
It was a book, little booklet, like a little magazine, and it was entitled The Benefits of Wheatgrass by Anne Wigmore. That was kind of transformative. But no explanation. I read it. I thought, well, I don't know where I'm going to get Anne Wigmore's wheatgrass in the Himalayas. Years later, I met her and told her about it, and she was really proud. She said, really, a sadhu in the Himalayas gave me? He just came out of a cave and he gave me your book. She was happy. But through my travels, of course, I found the highest, deepest, most beautiful purpose in bhakti, the path of bhakti, the path of devotion. And Vrindavan is where people approach God as Krishna. And the conception of Krishna is that there is one God for all religions and all living beings. But different people approach different aspects of that one God. In Krishna, what's the all-powerful aspect of Krishna or God is emphasized less than the sweetness and the beauty of God. Krishna means all attractive. And in Vrindavan, beautiful stories of when God appears as a child to attract our hearts. The sweetness, beauty, playfulness. That's in this path. That's the most emphasized, predominant aspect of God. But after years of travel, I realized that the journey home is really, we don't have to go anywhere except within ourselves. Our real home is within ourselves. When we reconnect with God, with our true self, then we realize everyone is our family. And when we make that connection, when we find our home within ourselves, then we're really at home everywhere. And by the way, my friend Gary, who I lost for so many years, somehow or other we ran into each other. He's a physical trainer at the Malibu gym. He's been there for like 30 years or something. He lives on Malibu Road in Malibu. Does that answer your question? Huh?
Yeah.
I don't even remember your question. Is there any other question? Yes.
So you were saying about one of the principles is to surround yourself with people who, I guess, seek the same goal, which is like connection, or righteous people, or whatever is the correct word. I forgot the word you used, but I mean, life. I guess it's objective. Something to thrive for, because the reality is that we live among all kinds of people, and most of them are not. So, considering the concept of Krishna and love, and seeking the connection and understanding that it's ever present, then do you perceive that regardless of whether a person is on the path, everybody is sent for a reason? And Krishna is working through everybody, regardless whether this person is on the path or is positive. Can you comment on that?
You are so insightful. Thank you. That is a very high vision. That's a very true vision. That everyone and everything is actually an orchestration for us to grow. But how many of us can actually see it that way? That's why satsang is so important. That we may have to deal with so many people. And we may have, family members and business people, or people we work with in the workplace, even friends from so many years. They may not share enlightened goals with us, and many may have a lot of negativity and a lot of complaining and a lot of lack of integrity. And it may not be possible for us to just shut them out, or we may not even want to do that. But how to live in this world but not of this world. For that we need, it's very helpful to have that satsang, to have that quality association with people that we can actually recharge our batteries with. If we give special time whenever possible to associate with those people who fill us with that positive spiritual energy, who fill us with that vision that everything is a positive opportunity. Then we can actually gradually learn more and more to see it that way.
So I see it's more of like a mentor relationship, somebody who like helps you stay connected from the past type of thing.
Mentors are very, very great gift. If we have mentors, it's really a great blessing in our life who can actually give us faith and give us guidance and give us hope and give us vision of how to navigate our life in this world in such a way that we're really going on our journey home. We're not being lost. We're not wasting time and wasting our lives. We really have a goal and we're proceeding. Mentors are very important. And colleagues who share those ideals with us and help to reinforce those ideals within us. Having exchanges with that is very important. Just like a mother doesn't like their children being with really nasty children. Yes? I remember when I grew up, when I became a teenager especially, the friends I made, my parents they were such loving people, but they didn't like my friends. They liked them, but they didn't like that I was with them. Yeah, why are you with this person? And the person that they liked the most, they thought he was just, they would always tell me, why don't you have more friends like Steve? He's such a gentleman, he's such a good person. Because when he would come to my house, he would talk to my mother and father, and he looked clean and like that. But behind the scenes, he was the one that was actually leading all the rest of us into everything my parents have disapproved of. So, that was interesting. But parents understand that who you associate with, you become like. If you're associating with gang members, you're going to probably be a gang member. If you're associating with drug addicts, you're going to probably become a drug addict. If you're associating with pious people, you're going to probably be really pious. So it's human nature. What we associate with, we become very influenced by that. So if we're associating with people who are really, very positive and very faithful and very compassionate and seeking love, and we have mentors who are really connected to that love, then that gives us the charged batteries, and along with our own spiritual practice, that we can actually, be with everyone else. And instead of being dragged down by them, we actually have a little influence to bring them up. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you believe is the best form of activism?
The best form of activism? To make that spiritual connection. And then from the very core of your heart to really have a spirit of compassion. Then in whatever form of activism it may take, it's something very empowered and very real. People are suffering and lost, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And the best activism is helping people to actually find health and meaning physically, emotionally, and ultimately spiritually.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You mentioned earlier about surrounding with people that have like a positive influence and so on. So if you surround yourself with positive people or people that share that spirituality, what happens to like, how can we connect with the people that perhaps like maybe don't share those values or like have negative values? And how can we, is there a way to change that in a sense or influence them in any sort of way?
A lot is determined by the particular person, the particular situation, the particular place. But if we do have a deeper spiritual connection, and through our chanting, through our meditation, through our prayer, through our associating with good people, then we'll have an intuition and an understanding of how to actually deal with each particular situation in an effective way. Things that are impediments to others, we have ourselves. And when we actually learn to use those impediments as facilities to give us opportunities to grow, then we'll also see how other people can do that too. We'll actually be equipped to help them. We could respect people, but not necessarily do what they do. Yes? And those are some basic choices we have to make. If a person's an alcoholic, he may not hate everybody he used to drink with, but he doesn't drink with them anymore. He may respect them, but it doesn't go that way anymore. So if we see certain people are influenced by greed or envy, or they just like to criticize and find faults with others, we don't want to be dragged down by that energy. So we don't share that with them. We can respect them for who they are, but then, they should respect for what we live by now. And if they don't, it shouldn't distract us. Yes.
What you were just explaining to her, that in some ways the time, place, circumstance, that has, in the Bhakti tradition, has a lot to do with the Yukta Vairagya principle, the making the best use of a particular situation. Can you give a little insight into that?
What Chaitanya Mangal is saying People call them chaits, so that's easy to. Yukta Vairagya is Sanskrit, and what it really means is that everything is potentially spiritual if we just have a spiritual perception. The simple analogy is morphine. Because we have a hospice, we have a couple hospices in India, actually 3. So a hospice nurse may give somebody morphine at the right dose to make it kind of more livable and a more quality experience during the last stages before death. And a drug pusher takes the same morphine to destroy a young person's life and exploit them for their money. So is the drug good or bad? Depends on who has it. A knife in the hands of a thief is going to cut somebody's throat and rob them for money. That same knife in the hands of a surgeon is going to save a person's life. So is the knife good or bad? Money can be used for wonderful good. Incredible. So many of the most wonderful things in the world have been created through wealth. And some of the most destructive, terrible things in the world are created by the same money. Intelligence. A lot of the biggest problems in the world have been created by people who have very, very high educations. And a lot of the greatest solutions in the world are those who have very high educations. You can have a very strong body and use it to rape innocent people, or you could use the same strong body to protect people from rape. So is a strong body good or bad? So Yukta Vairagya is to see that everything is potentially good and everything is potentially spiritual if we're good and we're spiritual and we use it for a higher cause. Everything we have free will, how to use it. And relations also. Are we going to use that relationship? Are we going to let it drag us down, or are we going to utilize this relationship for something positive, for something good? We have that choice. I like to tell the story of my own mother and father. Can I tell? It's a strange story, but I like it. When I was 8 years old, my mother told me, everyone loves your father, and everyone loves me, but we do not love each other. And we're going to separate. I was just a little boy, and I just couldn't imagine my mother and father not liking each other. It was so, confusing, and they were going to separate. So I was so confused and so bewildered, I just started to cry. And she looked at me, and she was about to say something, and I ran out of the room, and I ran down the stairs, and I ran out of the front door, and I ran through the front yard, and I ran across the street, and I ran a couple blocks, and I ran to a forest, and I hid. And I think she was really shocked by my reaction. But I wasn't just like strategically planning it. I was really hurt. And from the forest, I was watching for my father to come home from work, like some hours later. And he drove in his car, drove up the driveway of our little house. And he came in, and I secretly came to the back door and watched. And I saw him go in their bedroom and close the door. And I ran up to the door and put my ear to hear what they were going to talk about. Is this exciting so far? And I heard my mother tell my father what just happened to me. And there was complete silence. And I heard my mother tell my father, and my father tell my mother, for the sake of our children, we're going to make this marriage work. It wasn't easy, because they had some issues with each other. But they did. For the sake of a higher principle, they somehow or other went above all their little lower disputes. They weren't so important anymore because they had something higher that they had to unite for. And after a few years, they had such love and such respect for each other that I practically haven't seen in parents anywhere. They earned it. Their problem actually is what, if it wasn't for that problem, they would have just coasted along with kind of a mediocre, pleasant relationship. Because after a few years, romance kind of, I'm a Swami, I never had a girlfriend, so I don't have direct experience, but I've talked to people all over the place. And I see what happens. Romance doesn't last too long. What keeps the relationship together is respect and a common purpose together. So they went through a serious crisis. But that serious crisis was a great thing because they had to unite on a higher level. They couldn't survive where they were. And when they united on that higher level, they really came together. And they really, when my mother passed away, they were married 58 years. And they were absolutely devoted to each other. Spontaneously. And when I left home for 2 months on a summer vacation, and then 5 months later they got a letter from Iran that I was hitchhiking to India. They needed each other a lot then. So difficult situations could be great opportunities. If it wasn't for darkness, Thomas Edison would have never had the impetus to create light bulbs. So necessity is a great impetus, and that's also true in relationships. But we need mentors who help us to actually find that higher principle that we unite with, we live with. I'm seeing so many old friends. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for a wonderful discourse. It was very enlightening. And if any of you have any questions, you can ask them later. But I just wanted to make a few announcements here. This is his autobiography entitled The Journey Home. It's quite an amazing read. Some of you have already read it, so you know what I'm talking about. But this is available for purchase today, and Maharaj will be able to sign it personally. We're requesting a donation of about $15 for this book. So the books are kept here. That's one announcement. And Maharaj is coming up. May I talk about your next book, Maharaj, or do you want me to talk?
No, don't talk about me.
The second announcement I wanted to make was there's a program tomorrow. It's at one of the yoga studios in Culver City. I think a couple of you came there, Callie and Samantha, who came there last year. So if anybody is interested in coming for tomorrow's programs, it's from 6 to 8. I actually have the flyer. Here. This is the program. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. And the address is given right there. But I have a few flyers. If anyone's interested, please feel free to come and take the flyer from me. And then the final request I have for you is I have some feedback forms. Before you leave, if you can kindly fill up these forms, just for my information here. The pens are right here, but that'll be after we've taken dinner, not right now. So if anybody would like to have the book, you can either purchase it right now, so he can sign it for you, or you could do it after dinner, but it'll take me about 10 minutes to get the dinner ready. It's just warming up right now, so this is a good time to come and get the books if you would like to. Would you like it, Darcy?